right, so getting on with the program, we're going to start with learning about what the election results were and just in general what's happening with these primary elections. So we're going to start with Tony Hale. Tony Hale is the president of Beach City Democrats. He's a professional political consultant as well. He serves as an executive board member of the California Democratic Party for the 66th Assembly District, and he's also chair of the Resolutions Committee of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. Tony's here to talk about the Torrance City Council election results and other election results he wants to opinionate on. So here's Tony, and he's going to be sharing his screen.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. So we just had election today, and so we had some local elections, which I'm going to focus on in Torrance. And sadly to say, we lost Torrance. I'll talk about the mayor's race first. So on the screen here, you see the two candidates for mayor. Fortunately, you don't have to see the Ralph's commercial there. But George Chen and Cliff Newmark. Cliff Newmark's the Democrat, and George Chen is the Republican. Chen is a current city council member. Newmark is a former city council member who went on to serve currently at the El Camino Community College Board, and came back to run for mayor with a number of other Democrats to try and win leadership in Torrance. Torrance has a large API community, so that factored heavy into this race. I'm going to share with you the results of that race. Let's see.
Excuse me, what does API refer to?
So API is Asian Pacific Islander. So basically those group, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Filipino, Pacific Islander. So thank you. I get so used to these terms, you know. So as you can see, George Chen won 55% of the vote, and Cliff Newmark won 44% of the vote. It's not likely that with the remaining votes that he can make it. The frustrating thing is that we're looking at a turnout in Torrance of and there's more votes than are showing here on the screen. So votes have been received, but they haven't been counted yet. They haven't been opened up and counted. So when votes come to the county registrar, if they come in a vote by mail envelope, they first have to verify the signature on the envelope. And they compare that signature with a computer that they have the record of your signature from your voter registration. And so then they have to compare those signatures. If they match close enough, they say it's a valid ballot, and they put it in a big box. And then after they get enough of them, after election day, they count them. Now on election night, you'll see the first ballots are those vote by mail ballots that have been received prior to election day. So we had quite a number of vote by mail ballots come in before election day. So those are the very first ballots counted. Then what comes in are the ballots from the voting centers. And those are paper ballots, even though there's machines. The machines print the ballots on paper, and then they're counted at the registrar's office. So that can happen fairly quickly. Usually by the end of the night, we will have the totals from the voting centers. But still yet to be counted are ballots that were mailed in late, and they could be mailed as of election day and been given 7 days to get to the county registrar's office. Or a lot of vote by mail voters fill out their ballot and take it in on election day because they waited till the last minute. And so they'll take their ballot with the signature all set to go. They'll put in the box. It'll have to be shipped to Norwalk. It'll be opened at Norwalk, and then someone will put it in front of them and compare the signatures, and they'll go through that process. So that takes days. So we're probably not going to know the final results of this election for a few more days. Tuesday, there'll be another reporting. Friday, there'll be another reporting, and there'll be others after that, depending on how many votes are still outstanding. But as of reports I get from a political data company, the turnout was probably about 13,000 votes short of the total, which will be coming in the coming days. In order for Cliff Newmark to win, he would have to get 59.2% of the vote to be able to win that. Now, the big challenge in Torrance is that although Democrats have a good advantage, there's a large percentage of Asian voters. And so some 7,000 votes could have been cast for the mayor from Asian voters. And there's a clear distinction. You have a Chinese man running against a Caucasian. And so when you factor in, even though we have a Democratic advantage in Torrance, when you factor in the API vote, you add that to the Republican vote, they win. And this election was not run as a highly partisan election. Cliff Newmark tried to run as a candidate for everyone, didn't push his Democratic bona fides too much. And so it was difficult for the voters to distinguish between the two of them, especially if you had a natural affinity to one of them. If you were Chinese or you were Asian, you might have an affinity with Chen, and you might not have had a good reason not to vote for him if you weren't strictly partisan motivated. So that was the dynamic there. I do personally believe that this was a great failure for Torrance. His history on the council has, Chen's history on the council has been less than stellar. And he's connected to a very right-wing religious organization called the Bread of Life Church, which is a church out of Taiwan that has an anti-LGBTQ agenda. They put legislation in Taiwan against gay marriage. They're part of a network in the United States called Mass Reaction, which is organized to oppose the rights of gay people or LGBTQ. I talked to some of their members. I asked them if their church was anti-gay rights. They said yes, because it's against God's design. So there is a suspicion that Chen is part of a movement called Christian nationalism, which is a movement to create Christian law. What does that mean? It means that you should have the right not to serve gay people. You should have the right not to employ gay people. You should be able to discriminate based on your religion against people in your community. And one of the first low asks they have for people in their movement when they get elected to office is that you should put "In God We Trust" on the side of the building. Chen did that. It's on the council chambers. It's bigger than the name Torrance, City of Torrance, big giant gold letters, "In God We Trust." So I do believe that George Chen represents a very conservative movement in Torrance, and he's part of some other candidates who ran as well. The other candidates were Aurelio Matucci. How many, raise of hands, how many people have heard of Aurelio Matucci? Okay, a few of them. He is a true MAGA, a Republican. He took issue with one of the teachers in the elementary school. She did an exercise which they had done in previous years, which was to write a letter to their elected officials. And so she chose a topic that grade school children could have an opinion on. And that was, what should they do about the coyotes in the district? there was a problem. There is a problem in Torrance with coyotes and getting pets and that sort of thing. And so Matucci ran on a platform, Matucci and Coyotes Out. Unfortunately, they ended up with both of them. And so the teacher had these students write these letters to their elected officials. What should we do? Should we shoot them? Should we capture them? Should we do abatement? And of course, many of the young people favored abatement rather than killing the animals, right? Matucci went insane and thought it was an attack on him because these kids were giving him what he considered a woke perspective. And he attacked the teacher, called her out by name, called out the school, the room number by name, called for her to be fired. Friends of his piled on online and said that we should take our kids out of that school. This is horrible. This is left-wing propaganda. And the threats and the anger became so impassioned on social media, the Torrance police put on extra patrols to watch the school for fear of violence. And this is from the city council member. And that's just a little taste of some of the many things that Alma Tucci has that Aurelio Matucci committed while in office. Al has been great. Although
Al's not like that at all.
Al is not like that at all. Unfortunately, when we were talking to voters about, and I'm trying to get my computer to come back up here with the candidates. Unfortunately, when we talked to the voters about Matucci, people say, well, isn't he the good guy? We vote for him. He's our assembly member. I said, no, that's Muratsuchi, not Matucci. Oh yeah, I always vote for Mariachi. So here are all the city council candidates. On the lower right is Aurelio Matucci. Next to him is Gene Adelsman, our Democratic endorsed candidate, former managing editor of the Daily Breeze, retired Annenberg School of Journalism professor, and twice elected Woman of the Year in Torrance for her civic duty, raising millions of dollars for charities and public programs within the city. We thought that was going to be an easy win, but unfortunately, on election night, we found ourselves a couple hundred votes short. I'll share the results of that with you. Aurelio Matucci, you can see there got 2,000 in the final count here, 2,402 to 2,285. Up until, sorry,
Do you know this is the final count?
no, it's not the final. This is the current count. The current.
I think you said final count.
Sorry,
I think you said final count.
sorry. The most current count we have right now. Sorry, are these numbers here. There may be some 1,000 to 2,000 votes yet to be counted. We're not sure. We're not getting that out of the county office clearly. But prior to election day, because we get reports from the registrar of ballots that have been returned, we had almost a 60% lead if you look just by pure partisan votes. But what we feared was that Republicans stopped voting by mail. They were told not to vote by mail because the president said that's corrupt. And so they voted at the polls in large part. So we were afraid on election day we'd see this red tide rise and our advantage would be wiped out. And for a few minutes after the polls closed, we had a 300 plus vote margin of winning. But minutes after that, it dropped down to losing by over 200 votes. And we are told that there may be 3,000 more votes yet to be counted. As of Friday, 700 odd votes were counted. And we almost cut the lead in half of Matucci. So I'm projecting that if for the rest of the votes that come in, the late votes that come in, if Gene Adelsman gets 56%, we win. if there's enough votes, we will win by a couple hundred votes. So far, the first return 56% plus. So we're very happy to see that. The reason why we suspect that's happening is because by and large, almost exclusively, these votes that are not yet counted are late vote by mail ballots. And because we did so much better with the vote by mail votes, we believe that if these represent that population, that we will at least get a victory with just 56% of that vote and make up that 200 vote loss we had on election day. One of the bright spots in Torrance was the District 3, which is one of the other districts that was up for re-election. In that race, we had Lauren Cotner and Assam Sheikh. Lauren Cotner is the one on the left. Assam Sheikh is the one next to her. Assam Sheikh is the endorsed Democratic candidate, as far right as Matucci, and but not as smart. And she, in debates, was somewhat snickered at the public debates. She said that when asked why she was running for city council, she said because they want to defund the police. And she was very afraid of Antifa, and had a almost an hour-long Facebook Live video where she had a friend of hers who was African American come on the program to prove that she was not racist. And so she kind of stumbled through this race, but right now there's a comfortable lead with Assam Sheikh. It looks like he's going to be our Democrat elected to the Torrance City Council. The other race are these top 4 candidates here, and from left, if I get this right, from left to right is Jimmy Gao, which was our Torrance, our Democratic Party endorsed candidate. Next to him, John Kaji, who was a lifelong Republican, recently declined to stay, and ran for city council. Next to him was Dave Torrance, who was the Republican endorsed candidate. And then finally, Dave Zickelbaum, who is a registered Democrat, sought our endorsement, but didn't get it because of the long-standing relationship that Jimmy Gao had with our Democratic community. And so 4 candidates for 1 seat was a very tight race. But John Kaji spent an enormous amount of money. You could run a campaign in one of these districts for 30, 40,000, and you'd run a respectable campaign. He raised over 80,000 and had independent expenditures. So he had a tremendous amount of contact with the voters through mail. And the other factor with John Kaji is that he's a hero in the Japanese community. He has fought to get those that were interned to have their degrees or their credits from college restored because all their records were destroyed after being put to the internment camps. He was also instrumental in accepting the LGBTQ community within the Japanese organizations. That's in large part why he was endorsed by George Takei. But he has been a lifetime Republican. He's friends with Matucci and Chen, and we believe that he'll be part of that conservative voting bloc in the city. And this does not bode well for our prospects in Torrance. So I would like to stop sharing, and I'll share some of the results from that race. As you can see, this race here, John Kaji, 44% of the vote, and 21% for Zickelbaum, Jimmy Gao, 17%, and 16% for Carsonians. There were a large number of Japanese votes in this district that tipped the scales for John Kaji. And but his lead is unassailable, no matter how many votes are left to be counted. You can see Assam Sheikh there, 56% to 53. I think it will increase. The other election that was of note was the half-cent sales tax. And you see it here, winning by 55.86% to 44.14%. There was a great deal of controversy over this half-cent sales tax. But unfortunately, Torrance is the 4th worst city in California for fiscal solvency. They are in deep financial trouble. If they were to have a financial crash, they wouldn't be able to last for more than a few weeks with the reserves they have on hand. One major lawsuit could wipe out their reserves. So it's a perilous situation for Torrance, and this half-cent sales tax won't solve it, but it'll go a long way as a way to help the city make it to the point where it can get its financial house in order and restore some solvency to the city. George Chen was against the tax, Kaji was against the tax, and Tucci was against the tax. And ironically, the tax passed, but and they were all against it. One other little note of curiosity was the race for treasurer. Not really an important race, but in Torrance, it was quite a dramatic contest because the current treasurer, shortly before her election, stopped coming to work, and she cited that because the city council was considering lowering the salary of the city clerk, that she had too much stress to come to work. She was just too stressed out. That's her on the left, Cortez, and several people lined up for this race. But the situation was so bad that she didn't show up for years to work. It was so bad that the city couldn't get into its checking account. The city couldn't retrieve its basic fees for parking and for other revenue. They couldn't pay the bills to the contractors that they had that come with the city. So the city had to do all kinds of emergency measures to delegate the work to financial division within the city, and through emergency powers, take away the powers of the city clerk from her. And ironically, sometime after filing open, she filed to run for re-election. So she wins the Chutzpah Award. She at the League of Women Voters Forum, she stated that it's not about me. This is not about me. This is about you, the voter, and I'm your voice. And the League of Women Voters have a rule: you can't say anything negative about your opponent. And yet she hadn't been to work for years. And I joked with the mayor. I said, you know, with the rules the league has, if one of the candidates had a heart attack on stage, the other candidates would be able to point it out. So we were afraid with this many candidates that she might win, because there might not be enough voters who were following the news closely enough to know that her ballot designation of treasurer did not give her good qualification for the job. So the two main contenders were Tim Goodrich and Mike Griffiths, one former city council member and one current city council member. And Tim Goodrich, our Democratic endorsed candidate, became the leader and is almost guaranteed to win by the final count. Unfortunately, it's not a great position of power. The treasurer's office, you basically paint by numbers. You have pretty strict parameters on how you can invest the money and what you have to do, and you have staff to do it for you. So it's not a very powerful job. You are supposed to come to the council meetings and report, but to that extent, that's about it. Now, I've rambled on. I don't know how much time I've taken.
There are some questions there. Mayrin, you might want to ask, I think you're basically wanting to know, did Torrance go for Biden? So, since you've been talking about how conservative it was.
I think it did go for Biden, but we're talking about a very, and I don't remember right now, Sergio might have a clearer recollection on this, but we had a lot of areas go for Biden that we didn't expect to go for Biden. But that's a very different election. This is a low turnout election. Some of the frustrating things for me is that, as I take this loss to Matucci very personally, is that,
Don't call it a loss yet.
thank you so much.
Ain't over till it's over.
Thank you so much. Election night, we had about 2,000 votes for Gene. There are 6,739 registered Democrats in that district. There are 16,971 registered voters in that district. And we had little more than 4,000 votes on election night. It's very frustrating when there's that much apathy. Unfortunately, it's not sexy, but apathy is one of our greatest enemies. Questions? Yeah.
What's the actual registration breakdown in Torrance?
Wait, can you repeat the question? Just-
Uh,
The audience.
The gentleman would like to know what the breakdown in Torrance is. I put my computer down, I had the notes in there, I don't want to bring it up, but we have an advantage. We have an advantage overall, but it's not a strong advantage. Just for comparison, in District 5, where we fought with Matucci, there were 6,739 registered Dems, 5,345 registered Republicans. In District 3, we have 6,316 Dems, Republicans 3,647. And in District 1, we have 7,281,000 Dems and 3,957 Republicans. So in all these races, we really should have won. But there was another dynamic in play that was not partisan, which was the API vote. Voters that were voting for Chen are voters that were voting for Chen and Kaji in District 1. So that's something that makes it difficult, and it really narrows the margin. If we could have got every Democrat out to vote, we could have won, but it's hard to force them to vote.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on, just for the sake of time here. So we have Sergio, he's on Zoom with us. He's a virtual speaker. He had COVID, and so he's still feeling under the weather, but I'm pretty sure he's COVID free. Sergio is here to speak about the Los Angeles and California primary results and our path forward to November. So here's Sergio, and we'll feature him.
Thank you, Anne, and good afternoon, everyone. I am COVID free, but I'll guarantee, even if I wasn't, I cannot contaminate you via Zoom. So I'm happy to be here with all of you. But before I get started, I do want to answer a couple of questions. Torrance voted 60.23% for Joe Biden. 60.23% for Joe Biden in November of 2020, which is huge, pretty big. He received over 46,000 votes, 46,198 votes for Biden in Torrance. And before I get started, I do want to just wish everyone, this is a happy Pride Month. We celebrate Pride in the month of June. And I know we're talking about one of the candidates and his belief about LGBT folks, but I'm a proud LGBT person. I think I was made in God's image. I'm not just an LGBT, but I'm a strong Christian as well. So whatever that guy thinks about me, he can go think about it, whatever he wants to go think about it. But we're here. And I bring greetings this afternoon on behalf of both our state party chair, Rusty Hicks, and our county Democratic Party chair, Mark Gonzalez, who both send their love and their friendship to all gathered here. And lastly, I too vote for mariachi all the time. I like that. I'm going to be voting for mariachi all the time as well. Well, folks, we had an election on Tuesday. Not just because I'm a Democrat, not just because I'm a political consultant, but because I love America. I always believe that Election Day is one of the greatest days of the year. It's what I call Democracy Day. And no matter what we feel, no matter win or lose, no matter if our people supported, people we supported win or not, the fact is this is a day when we participate in this great experiment we call America and democracy, and people participate in the selection of their own government. It's absolutely amazing. Obviously, we want all our people to win, but at the end of the day, that is what we celebrate on that day. And so I call it Democracy Day on Election Day. And so I want to talk to you about the results of our Democracy Day. In California, the Democratic Party. So let me separate a little bit for those of you who may not know. The California Democratic Party makes endorsements in what we used to call partisan races. They technically don't exist anymore per our state constitution, but that would be our congressional races, our state legislative races, and our statewide constitutional offices. So we've endorsed in the races for governor, all the statewide constitutional offices, for Congress, for state Senate, and for state assembly. And just so there's a little bit of explanation, a little bit more, when the voters approved the top two primary, over 10 years ago, whenever that was, they adopted literally the top two primary. So in the races, the statewide races, congressional races, assembly races, and Senate races, the top two candidates will advance into a runoff, no matter what the vote result is. So if a candidate receives 91% of the vote and their opponent receives 8% of the vote, the top two will advance to the runoff. How about this one? If a candidate runs unopposed in the primary, but a write-in candidate votes for himself and gets one vote, then in the runoff election in November, that other person will appear on the ballot because he had the second highest number of votes. And it has happened several times, actually. And then that person, just because, gets 40% of the vote in November with like nothing. So it is the top two. In local races, the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, City of Long Beach, per their charters, people must be elected with a majority vote. So if no candidate receives a majority vote in the primary, then there is a runoff in November. But if a candidate does get a majority vote in the primary, that person is deemed elected. The local races are all very different. In Torrance, it's a one and done race, one and you're done. In other council races, we elect two people and the top two people win. Every city is different, but per the charter of the City of Los Angeles, the City of Long Beach, and the County of LA, their charters require their people to win by majority vote. So that being said, I'm proud to announce that 99% of the Democratic Party endorsed candidates won this past just last week or Tuesday, won their races up and down the state of California. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our statewide races first, and then I'll come down to here at the county. All of our statewide endorsed candidates won, or let me rephrase that, are in the top two runoff election. Governor Gavin Newsom received 56.4% of the vote. Our Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis received almost 53% of the vote. Dr. Weber, our Secretary of State, received almost 60% of the vote. Our Attorney General, Rob Bonta, received almost 55%. Our State Treasurer, Fiona Ma, received almost 58%. But our State Controller, we endorsed a candidate named Malia Cohen. Malia currently sits on the Board of on the Board of Equalization, and prior to that, served on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco County. She received only 21.9% of the vote. Her opponent, a Republican, Lan Hee Chan, received 36.9% of the vote. That's going to be a tough race for us to win in November. And a lot of focus will be placed on the race for our state controller. Our insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, who is the incumbent, received only 36.5% of the vote. He was the incumbent with the least amount of vote in re-election. And the second and third place finishers right now are separated by less than half a percentage point. And so one of them is a Republican, one of them is a Democrat. If the person's a Republican, then Ricardo should be okay. If the person's a Democrat, it's going to be a tough race to the end. And that a Democrat is Assemblyman Mark Levine from up in Northern California. Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurman received 46.2% of the vote. Here's a little trivia question. The superintendent of public instruction was never considered a partisan race technically. And so if he would have got 50% of the vote, he would have won outright. That's the only statewide office where there's no top two in case it goes to a top two. It's an automatic victory if a person reaches 50%. Unfortunately, he only got 46.2, so he will be in a runoff in November. And then, of course, our Board of Equalization member, Tony Vasquez, received 64.4%. In the race for the House of Representatives here in LA County, all of our Democratic Party endorsed candidates won. They were the top vote getter and have advanced into the runoff election here in LA County. In Congressional District 42, which is a brand new district in Southeast LA County, the district became vacant, I guess, when two incumbent members of Congress decided to retire. Congress members Alan Lowenthal and Lucille Roybal Alder. They were both redistricted into the same area. They're redistricting. They both are in their 80s. They both have announced their retirement, so it opened up the seat. And Mayor Robert Garcia of Long Beach and Assembly Member Cristina Garcia were the two top contenders. Robert Garcia came in first place with almost 46% of the vote. And the second place finisher is a Republican. This is one of the most Democratic seats in the country. And so it guarantees basically that Robert will be the next member of Congress representing California's 42nd Congressional District. That election is pretty much done. He could probably spend no money in his election and win big. So he will do well. In that same area, because Assemblymember Garcia decided to give up her seat to run for Congress, her seat opened up. And the party could not coalesce behind a candidate, so we did not make any endorsements. But Downey Mayor Blanca Pacheco was the second top vote getter. The top vote getter was a Republican. All the Democrats split the remaining vote. She became the top Democrat. She will be in a runoff with the Republican, and same scenario, she can spend not $1 and will win in November. And so Blanca Pacheco is 99.9% will be the next member of the assembly from 8064. But 8061, a little thing exciting in 8061. 8061 is currently the seat that was vacated by, oh my God, how can we forget?
Autumn Burke.
Autumn Burke, sorry, Lordy. Autumn Burke, who resigned from the legislature late last year. And so there was two elections, one to fill the remaining term of her term, which expires at the end of the year, and then the new term. And it looks like Tina McKinnon has won the election, or will most likely win the election to serve in the assembly for the remaining term of this term. But she is in second place in the full term, the regular term. And just a little while, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe, something similar happened in the 33rd Senate District, 32nd Senate District, excuse me. In the 32nd Senate District, there was a vacancy when Tony Mendoza resigned from the state Senate. And there was a special election, and one person won that special election, but she did not win the full term. And so she went on to serve 4 months in the state Senate. And then when her term was over, Bob Archuleta became the senator there. So something similar could be happening in 8061. Robert Pullen Miles is the endorsed candidate of the Democratic Party. He came in he came in first in the full term race, but he is trailing in the special election race. And Tina McKinnon is in the lead in that spot there. So that's going to be a little interesting there. In the county level, at the county level, we had two races for the Board of Supervisors. In District 1, Hilda Solis, who is a member of the County Board of Supervisors, and she's a former member of the cabinet from the Obama cabinet, was Secretary of Labor. She was reelected very easily because in the county, she already won the majority. There is no runoff. She has been reelected. Well, technically, I guess we have to wait till they're both certified, but she will be reelected and will continue to serve 4 more years on the Board of Supervisors. In District 3, there was a vacancy in District 3. That is the seat being vacated by Supervisor Sheila Kyo. In District 3, the party was not able to coalesce behind a candidate, so we had no consensus. And at the end of the day, the top 2 finishers were Democrats. The top finisher was Senator Bob Hertzberg, who's currently the majority leader in the California State Senate. And then about a distant second, about 10 points behind, was Lindsay Horvath. And Lindsay ended up about 2 or 3 points in front of Henry Stern, a state senator from the Valley as well. So there will be a runoff in November between Bob Hertzberg and Lindsay Horvath for to represent the 3rd district on the Board of Supervisors. This is the first time that the entire San Fernando Valley is in one district. It's always been divided. It's never been really one whole thing, and this is the first time. So if I was going to handicap the race, which I won't, because of consultants, we don't really tell people what we think, but I would say that Bob Hertzberg definitely has the upper hand, as his district, which represents 1 million people, is entirely in the 3rd district, which represents 2 million people. So he already represents half of the population there. I think will do well. The other 2 races in the county was the race for county assessor. Our party endorsed Jeffrey Prang, the incumbent, and unfortunately, he fell just short of winning the seat outright. So there will be a runoff for county assessor in November as well. But the big race here is the race for the LA County Sheriff. And the LA County Sheriff, the incumbent currently is Alex Villanueva. Alex Villanueva was elected 4 years ago when he ousted the former sheriff, Jim McDonald. And he did that by, I believe, because he was Latino and was endorsed by the Democratic Party. And every piece of mail, every commercial, everything that during that campaign, he touted his endorsement of the Democratic Party. And LA being such a blue county, I think is one of the reasons why, if not the main reason why, Alex Villanueva won. Since he's been on the Board of Supervisors, he's been at war, I'm the sheriff, he's been at war with the Board of Supervisors. They don't get along. You see it on TV. He came into the election polling at about 35% in November or December, which is about what he got. And so really the race became, can we force a runoff with Alex Villanueva? And there was a lot of question. People thought he had $3.5 million raised. He was the incumbent. He had the title of sheriff, and whether or not he could win it outright. He did not. There is a runoff. The race is now between Sheriff Villanueva and Robert Luna, the chief of police, former chief of police at Long Beach. Both are Democrats, and both are eligible to receive the Democratic Party endorsement in the runoff. The way that works, folks, is if no candidate received an endorsement of the Democratic Party in the primary, like in the 3rd supervisorial district between Hertzberg and Lindsay Horvath, those who sought the endorsement in the primary are eligible to seek the endorsement in the runoff. And so the party will be considering a party endorsement in the 3rd supervisorial seat. We will be considering an endorsement in the sheriff's seat. Both Sheriff Villanueva and Chief Luna are eligible for the party endorsement, and both Senator Hertzberg and Councilmember Horvath of West Hollywood are also both eligible to seek the party's endorsement. Then we move to the big race, the mayor of LA. Well, you all know the top 2 finishers are Rick Caruso and Congresswoman Karen Bass. Both are Democrats, officially. Sorry, both are Democrats officially.
Almost said that with a straight face.
You know, Rick Caruso became a Democrat in January, and he announced to the world why he was a Democrat. It was a very, very well-written letter in his announcement. He spent, over $40 million in this race. A lot of money was spent against Karen Bass, attacking her. But at the end of the day, they're less than 3 points away from each other. And I don't know how you feel about Mr. Caruso or Congresswoman Bass, but I will tell you this. I think we're going to have a very healthy debate of ideas. I think we're going to have two different views of Los Angeles and two different views of her future. And I'll leave it at that. Rick Caruso did not seek the party's endorsement in the primary, and therefore he's not eligible to seek the party's endorsement in the runoff. Congresswoman Bass did. She is eligible to, and we will be considering endorsing her at our next County Central Committee meeting, which will be this Tuesday. So on Tuesday, we possibly could have an endorsed candidate in this race, or maybe not. It depends how the Central Committee votes. All of the other open seats where we have potential endorsements from the primary will be done at our meeting in July, which I think is July 12th or something like that. And we'll have our endorsements in there for like the other races. I'm almost done. So in the race for mayor, I said we have a runoff. I think it would be the most expensive municipal race probably in the history of America after all is said and done. Even more expensive than when Bloomberg ran in New York the first time. In the primary, he spent over 40 million. That didn't include all the independent expenditures that were against and for people. And so I think at the end of the day, this will come down in history as probably the most expensive municipal race in the history of our country. But we'll see. I will tell you, I'm a consultant. That's what I do for a living. Oh my God. I mean, what a great contract to have if you're Rick Caruso. I mean, you can retire. I mean, technically, 15% is the going when people raise, people spend or whatever. So if we're looking at that, that's like $6 million. I'm just saying.
You didn't apply for the job, did you?
I know. Well, some of us, like Tony and I, have morals, and we're very picky on who we choose. But there's some out there that just they don't. I'll leave it at that. In the race for city attorney in the city of LA, we have a runoff. Everybody thought that the main person in this race was going to be a gentleman by the name of Kevin James. Kevin was endorsed by labor. He was just in everywhere. But at the end of the day, he did not do well at all. I'm trying to get the results here because I can't remember off the top of my head. Here we go. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so the top vote getter was Faisal Gill, then was Marina Torres. This is about a 1 point difference here. And to make up that 1 point will be very difficult. So I'm predicting these are going to be the two finalists right here. And they're pretty much dead even. They're what, 0.04% difference, which is probably a little bit over 100 vote difference. Mr. Gill is probably the most progressive person on this list. And Marina Torres is a prosecutor. Marina she prosecutes corruption basically. And then she also put like mobsters in jail. I mean, she really has done some tough work. So there'll be a runoff between these two. Kevin was the person that everyone thought was the lead contender here, but he did pretty bad actually. Kevin, most of you may or may not know, used to be a conservative talk show radio host. He's openly gay, but when he was a radio talk show host, he unfortunately said some things about immigrants, Latinos, African Americans, and what have you. He saw the light, became a Democrat, and is pretty progressive, I guess, to an extent now. But I do believe that maybe a lot of what he said in the past just stayed along there with him. In the next race I want to talk to you about is the race for controller. And controller in the city of LA is like the auditor. They sign the checks and what have you. The favorite among everybody for the longest time was Councilmember Paul Torrance. He is probably of this group here, the quote established candidate. This candidate here, David, is always running. He runs every 4 years, and he'll probably run for the next 20 years because he does that every 4 years. But this was the guy who everybody thought was the front runner. Kenneth Mejia really ran a grassroots campaign originally through like Twitter. Really, I mean, Twitter and Instagram, and he was making videos like every day. He eventually started getting support, eventually started raising money, and look, he did really, really well here. He's definitely beat the incumbent or the established candidate by about 13 points or so. And so this is gonna be a runoff between these two in the November election. All right. In the LA City Council, and I'm almost done, there are eight races up. The odd seats. Council members Gil Cedillo, Bob Blumenfield, Monica Rodriguez, and Curran Price were all reelected. They were all endorsed by our party. There was a lot of drama towards the end. A lot of people believed that some of these incumbents were going to be in trouble. A lot of money was being spent on both sides by independent expenditures, like millions of dollars, literally. But at the end of the day, all of them won their races and their re-elections comfortably. The party endorsed a candidate in District 11, Great Good. He did not do good. He did pretty bad, actually. But there is a runoff there between two Democrats. And in District 13, Mitchell Farrell was forced into a runoff. He's the only candidate running for re-election that was forced into a runoff. And close to us here in San Pedro, Wilmington, Harbor City, Harbor Gateway, and Watts, the Democratic Party endorsed candidate was Tim McCosker. He came in first place, about 10 points ahead of his nearest opponent. And so there'll be a runoff in the November election there. And then lastly, I'll just countywide, I'll talk about the judges. We endorsed in 8 of those races. And in 8 of those races, 4 of those candidates did not get elected or did not advance into a runoff. In 3 of those races, our endorsed candidate is in a runoff. That's Elizabeth Lashley Haynes, Holly Hancock, and Patrick Hare. And in seat 156, our endorsed candidate has won the race outright. She is a current judge. She has been reelected, and that's Her Honor Carol Elswick. I think, Tony mentioned Torrance. I'll just mention one last race, and that's the race on Long Beach. Long Beach is the second largest city in the county. There is a race for mayor there. Our endorsed candidate was Rex Richardson. He was the top vote getter, but his opponent, his closest opponent, was less than 3 points away. That's going to be a really tough race in November. It is literally a true moderate versus a true progressive. The moderate's friendly, though. I mean, I don't say it like in a bad way, but it's going to be one of those races. This is the dynamics. Her area where she's strong at has 50% of the vote. Three council districts produce more than 50% of the vote. The other 6 council districts combined produce the other 50. And she is from those 3 where it's very strong. So this is going to be a real tough race come November. And then lastly, I'll end with this, and then I'll open it up for questions, and I'll share the questions with Tony if he wants. But let me tell you a little bit about elections and how they work. We believe, based on focus groups, focus groups and studies and what have you, that it takes a minimum of 7 to 10 impressions for people to remember your name. 7 to 10 impressions for people just to remember your name. Now, an impression could be a piece of mail. An impression could be a knock on your door. An impression could be a telephone call, a text. The best impressions are mail, if you get to the mail. Now, we spend a lot of time writing mail, writing messaging, designing mail, and the average voter looks at a piece of mail for 7 seconds. So we have 7 seconds to sell a message to you. And that's, of course, if you're not inundated with 20 other pieces of mail, because at that time you toss most of it away. So even though it takes 7 to 10 impressions for people to remember your name, every time we send you a mailer, you're probably not looking at it. Or you might be looking at it and tossing it, but your partner in the home or the other people who live there may not be looking at it because you tossed it in the trash can. And so we have to reach out to you in many other ways. And so that's why we knock on the door. That's why we do texting. That's why we do phone calling. That's why we do emails, because it's what it takes for us to vote for you. Now, look, the county in LA updates the voter file almost every single day. So every single day, I know who's voted and I know who's not voted. And I tell you this much, the moment you vote, ain't no one calling you again because you already voted. We're not gonna waste our time and our money, spending money on a text call, a phone call, going to your door or sending you mail. And so the best campaigns will update their list every day so that we toss you out once you vote. And so when people say, oh my God, I already voted 2 weeks ago. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. And so the reason we're calling you is because you didn't vote. And at the end of the day, we hear it all the time. When people say, as a consultant, and people come to me or a client comes to me and says, oh my God, Sergio, people are saying they're getting mad because we're calling too much. I said, then you're doing your job. You're calling voters. You're talking to them and they're going to remember you. And whenever anyone says, I'm not going to vote for you if you call me one more time, they were never going to vote for you. And so as it's hard to say that, and I know that as clients or as candidates, you don't want to hear that. And as volunteers, when you're dialing and calling, you don't want to hear that. And as a voter, you don't want to get all these phone calls. But at the end of the day, that's what it takes for people to remember your name. Look at the turnout in this election. Dismal, poor. Now, my personal opinion, and not that of the Democratic Party, so we'll put the disclaimer out there, it's not that of the Democratic Party, is that there was nothing scary on the ballot. People vote when they're scared. When we were going to, eliminate affirmative action, people went to the polls. When we were going to eliminate this, people went to the polls. When we're going to eliminate something, we go to the polls. It was nothing scary on the ballot. Yes, some of our local candidates are scary as shit. Absolutely. But the reality is that most people were not. And that's my personal opinion why people didn't go vote. There's a ballot measure that's going to be on the ballot in November, God willing, that will put into our state constitution the guarantee that a woman has a right to choose, the choice. The right to choice will be hopefully enshrined in our state constitution after November. That will force people to vote. You will see the numbers that go out because people want to enshrine that. They're afraid that if we don't do that, our right will be taken away. And in reality, the only time a right has been taken away by a ballot box in California was Prop 8. LGBT folk had the right to marry before Prop 8. And it was the first time that a right was taken away by someone at the ballot box. And so I believe that's one of the reasons why. But I also believe that voters need to hear your name, your impression 7 to 10 times. And how often does this happen? Ready? Ring, 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 ring. Oh yeah, hi, I'm calling on behalf of Tony Hale, who's running for mayor of Torrance. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, can we count on your vote? Yes. Hang up the phone. Honey, who was that? Oh, I don't know, some guy running for mayor. What was the person's name? I already forgot. It happens all the time. And so is that one of 7 impressions? Maybe, but maybe we need more than 7 to 10 impressions because they just don't remember Tony's name. And so we do little tricks in the business. If you could afford, for example, what I'd call a contact letter, and that's every single contact you make, the very next day you send a letter. Thank you for your support for Tony Hale. Or thank you for being, I know you're undecided, here's a little bit more information. Because it reminds people that they made a commitment. It reminds people they made a commitment to somebody. And they're like, oh shit, I said I was gonna vote for Tony Hale, I gotta vote for him now. And so those are just some of the 7 to 10 impressions there. Tony, if you want to add more there, but I know that's I was trying to answer the question there about the phone calls and whatever. It's just unfortunate. And then this is the worst part, okay? If you're like in LA, where there's a mayor, city attorney, city controller, a council member, or if you were in the open congressional seat, the open assembly seat, you're not just getting phone calls from Tony Hale, you're getting people trying to make 7 to 10 impressions from all these other candidates as well. Because that's how you remember names, 7 to 10 impressions. Now, not here. Obviously here, I'm speaking to the elite. If you're a member of a Democratic club, you're already an informed voter. I mean, so I'm not talking about you here in the Zoom space that we're in. I'm talking about the average voter. And fortunately, we're not the average voter. The average voter is my mom, my dad. When I asked them questions, like I said, Dad, who are you voting for mayor? Rick Caruso. Dad, why are you voting for Rick Caruso? Because he's going to solve homelessness. Oh, he is? Oh, okay. What else is he going to do? He's going to put 500 new maintenance people on the streets. Okay. Dad, how's he going to pay for it? Oh, I don't know. He didn't tell me that part. He just told me he's doing it. And so then my dad calls me one day and goes, I'm not voting for Caruso anymore. And I said, why? Because our local council member who lied in my face is endorsing him. So therefore he must be bad news. And I'm like, okay, so they're the local person. They're the real voter. We here are not. So when I talk about 7 to 10 impressions, we're talking about the average voter. If there was a way to put on the voter file, oh, Tony Hale, member of a Democratic club, don't call him 7 to 10 times, you probably would do that because it's also wasting our time calling you because you are the informed voter. But for the most part, that's how that works. Tony?
Thanks. So I want to answer that question that I didn't have in front of me before, and that was the total voters in Torrance. And so in Torrance, there are 92,895 voters. Of that, there are 39,143 Democrats. Only 26,217 Republicans and 27,535. So remember, 39,143 Democrats, and our Democratic candidate got a total of 9,656 votes. So this is the discouraging thing about getting people out to vote. And this is what Sergio was just talking about. It's how we motivate people to have enough information to be interested. Some of the interesting things that I have to point to in the LA city array, the Los Angeles city race, and that is that of the people who return ballots by mail, 373,918 of them were already permanent vote by mail voters. The people who turned in a ballot that weren't were only 123,000. So still, even though we're mailing every voter a ballot, the people who are returning those ballots by mail are in large part all signed up to be permanent vote by mailers. They were already doing it before they got a vote by mail ballot. So go ahead.
If I may add to Tony on that one, I've always told people this, voting is, what's the right word? It's a characteristic issue. It's like a habitual issue. You know, when you're first day in college and you go to that first day of class and you sit at that desk, and for whatever reason, you go back to that same desk every day because it's your desk. It's almost voting the same way. My brother, who I love dearly, love my brother to the end of the world, has only voted 3 times in his life. In 1996 to legalize pot, in 2010 to legalize pot, and in 2016 to legalize pot. Is my brother gonna vote for Tony Hale for mayor of Torrance? Probably not. And so that's why we don't target every voter. We look at what is the high propensity of voters. I can tell you right now, most candidates will freak out and they're like, oh my God, the ballots have dropped. The ballots have dropped. People are voting. Oh my God. And I'm like, okay. Less than 10% of the voters will vote. A small percentage of voters vote in the first 10 days. So those people who are complaining about the phone calls are probably getting my phone calls because you're the only person I'm focusing for those 10 days. Because I know you vote early. Everybody else votes late. And it's going to take a couple of election cycles for people to change their habit on voting. Like Tony says, the vast majority of people who voted by mail early are vote by mail voters. And eventually, several cycles later, if we continue this concept of voting centers, and remember, technically, this is an emergency order for COVID. It could go back to whatever it could go back to. But I don't think it's going to ever go back to that. I think this is going to be the way we do elections from now on.
Okay, now so I'm just make one more comment on the city race, LA City. And I'm sure that Sergio's brother voted for pot because he thought there was a sample that came with the ballot. But in this last election so far, 266,000 of the voters were white. This is the most diverse city in the world. 266,000 were white, 1,015 were Latino. Only 45,000 were African American. So, and then if we look at people over 60 who voted in this in city election, were 247,000 were over 60. People under 30 were only 61,000. People in between 30 and 60 were 242. So the largest number of people who voted were older, over 60, and white. But there are lots of voters out there that are of the other demographics. If you look at the total number of registered African American voters, there are 187,000 African American voters in LA County. If just half of those voters voted, Karen Bass may have won the mayor's race outright on election day. We need to get people out to vote. They need to vote for their own interests. And we certainly hope for those democratic values. And I'll thank you so much.
There is a hand up. And there's a hand up. I don't know.
Oh, a hand up. Oh, okay. One hand, and then we have to move on. Go ahead.
Hi, Sergio. I wanted to ask you about the recall of Bodine, and Newsom said that it was predictable. People wanted to clean up the streets in San Francisco, and crime is rampant on the streets. And I think that feeling is widespread. I've experienced it even in a wealthy neighborhood of PD. I've seen Ralph being robbed, and the guards couldn't do anything. My other side in Alta Beauty. Last week, we had one person who broke into a house. He was released the same day. He came the following day and broke into another house on my street alone. So this democratic or whatever it is, whether it's district attorney that's saying, these are low crimes. These are not violent crimes, but they touch a lot of people. And it's basically like the Democrats saying, do not elect us.
Okay, so we want to just get to the question and then.
So my question is there a change in position by whether it's Gascon or district attorneys or the legislators to change this idea that if you commit a crime and it's less than $900, you'll just be let out of prison.
So
You won't go to prison. You won't get incarcerated. So you can go into any store, break, and as long as you steal less than $900, you're safe.
But I want to,
Well, unless you have something, Sergio, I'll go real quick.
go ahead.
So that policy was put forward by the legislature, not by progressive district attorneys. So it's an overall question about policies. And I would say that as a Democratic Party, we need to define our message on public safety. We have failed to provide a clear message on public safety. We need to do that in order to win from the bottom up, because otherwise we're going to lose people.
So you were talking about the $950.
Yeah.
That was a proposition that the voters.
Sorry, yeah, that was brought by the voters, not by the district attorney.
Right,
That's right.
and in Texas, it's 1,500, the top.
Right. so the 900 that you're talking about is not even the high in terms of what other states are doing. And it is off topic, so we have actually talked about this in previous meetings. So let's continue.
And if
We
I
have
may-
two other speakers.
If I may, I just
Go
want to
ahead,
say,
Sergio.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity to come. I wish I was there in person. I really wanted to be there in person, but I'll tell you this much. This is the first time since, I guess, post-COVID, for me, it's been 2 weeks now, that I didn't cough up a lung. And so maybe it's because I'm with friendly Democrats. And so I just want to say thank you. And thank you this is a really nice forum you put together, and I look forward to seeing you at the picnic in July.
Yeah, I look forward, I really look forward to you coming. I was gonna send you another invite, so thank you. I hope this is a confirmation.
It is a
Okay,
confirmation.
that'd be great, but I'm so happy that you were able to make it today, Sergio, and also
Right.
Tony. This, all in it was enlightening, and we're happy you're feeling better. And in future meetings, we'll talk a little bit even more about Katie Porter and Christy
Yes.
Smith and Jay Chen, because I know some people here are working there.
And lastly, I want to say, for those of us who are follically impaired, moving the picnic to 5 p.m. is a great thing.
All right. Okay,